Hello everybody and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. I'm your host, Jez FM. Actually, this week, Danette is going to be hosting the Magical Learning Podcast, which is a podcast that looks at important topics in business and life and breaks them down in a fun and lighthearted way. This week, we're talking to Ishan Galapathy, who is an amazing person when it comes to understanding how to make businesses run smoothly by how to get your employees actually engaged. He mentioned some pretty startling statistics about disengaged employees right at the beginning. So stay tuned for those. But then he also gives you some tips on how to fix it. If you want to have more engaged employees or you want to become more engaged at work, this is an amazing conversation. And everybody, thank you so much for sharing and listening. As always, have a magical week.
Hello and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. Today it's a little bit different because Jez's internet is playing up a little bit, so I've been voluntold to be the host. Jez is joining us, and as you can see in the podcast description, we do have a guest, and we'll get to our guest shortly. But for today, we have a heap of team members, so this is super exciting. We're going to go round the room and welcome in our guests. Now, Al, you were in first, so how's your week been?
It's been fantastic, Danette. One of the things that I've been trying to do since being up here on the Gold Coast is go out on the jet ski and see some whales. On the weekend, I finally, after 3 years of wandering out, I found some whales. One popped up out of the water like about 20 metres away from us and gave me all the adrenaline I needed.
Oh, but how exciting. That is so cool, Al.
It was such a fantastic day.
Oh, sounds beautiful. Oh, and next, Jez, I think you were next on. How are you? How's your week?
Yeah,
other than internet.
Yes. So my internet has been a bit choppy, but other than that, I have had a great week. Been uploading a lot of podcasts because I'm heading off to France and India over the next couple of weeks. So getting that all prepped. So I've probably made about 9 podcasts this week. So it's been hectic, and I'm excited to make this one as well when I get back.
Nice. Thanks, Jez. And John, how are you this week?
Doing well, Danette. Howdy. Just another week. I don't know. It's just another one of those.
Well, it's great to see you too, John. We've missed you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
And Graham, how are you this week?
I'm here, so I guess that's a start. I missed out on catching up with John this morning, which is disappointing, but got some medical stuff sorted with Dad, which was
Nice.
A mixed thing. He's not talking to me anymore because we didn't get time to go to Bunnings. Long story. And yes, I have been at a book fair run by Lifeline in Canberra. First time and quite possibly last time. Well, it is an experience.
Lots
But other
of
than that,
people.
I'm very grateful to be here.
I have to share something for my week this week, and it happened yesterday. I went to put the girls in, and in their massive chicken run was a hawk. So I had to hunt it out. But first time I've ever seen a hawk on the ground anywhere near the chickens. It wasn't after the eggs or anything. It was just in the run. I suspect eating some of the corn and stuff that the girls get fed. This is our chickens, Ishan. So that was super exciting. It was a beautiful looking bird. Anyway, it got out and flew away. So that was awesome. And no chickens or guinea fowls were harmed in that process either. Great to see everyone on the podcast. And I'd love to now welcome in Ishan. Ishan Galapathy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Happy to, and thanks for this opportunity, Danette. And when you said you took the girls out for a feed, I was going to start by saying I actually took the boys out for a feed, and that's the weekly highlight for me. And when I say the boys out, I mean the boys out. So I've got 2 teenage boys. Well, the older one just got out of being a teenager. He turned 20 a few weeks ago. And we had a very belated lunch out on Sunday, with my wife and the 2 boys. So that's kind of the highlight for the week. And did some good work during the week. And here I am, topping it off and finishing off the week with all of you lovely people. As a way of introducing, I have the fancy title of saying Operational Excellence Strategies, which is a tongue twister in itself. But essentially, I work with manufacturing or logistics businesses. So if anyone's making something or moving something, they're the type of people or companies I work with. And essentially, I help to improve their productivity. It's a little bit like trying to water your garden. And if you are holding on to a hose and sometimes you feel like there's not a lot of water coming through, and you'll be tempted to turn that little tap on a little bit more, trying to get more water out. And you may or may not realize it's not the problem of turning on the tap, because it might be on at the fullest. It might be that you've got some kinks in the hose. Some of them are obvious and some of them are not so obvious. I'm talking metaphorically, of course. So, it's so obvious to undo the kinks in the hose, the ones that you see, and you go like, didn't realize I'm getting more water out from the hose. But then there are ones that are hidden. So the work that I do with businesses is exactly like that. There are kinks in the businesses that are obvious, and then there are the ones that you can't see. So what I do is I go and help businesses through various programs and coaching and mentoring to undo those kinks, and also to train them how to look out for the ones that are not so obvious. So the benefit is that, as we talk in the manufacturing world, that the asset utilization, so the equipment you've got, the buildings you've got, and the people you've got, you get to maximize the utilization in a good way to get more from what you've already got. That's what I do, and that's what I love doing.
I love that introduction. And Ishan, I do believe you have a new book out. Do you want to tell our listeners and our viewers just a little bit about your book as well?
Yes, I've got a new baby. I feel like the parent with the new baby. So this is the third book. So it's titled Unlock and Engage the Seemingly Disengaged. So the first book was about how to identify the kinks. It's titled Hidden Growth Opportunities. It's written for people to go like, how do I go and look for these hidden opportunities? The second one, titled Advance, is a simplified framework so that they can apply techniques used in a lot of multinational companies as a holistic framework and a structure or a program with tools, templates. It's like a bit of a DIY kit. That's the program. But we all know it's not the magic in the tools, the techniques, or even technology that makes the difference. It's the people, because no matter how good technology is, no matter how good your robotics, the automation is, there are still people pushing buttons, interacting with your processes. And unless we manage that change, and unless we work with the people to bring out the best of whatever you got, the assets that I spoke of, then we all struggle running a business in the third gear. So this book, filled with a lot of my personal experiences and also global case studies, I've been told that it's an easy half day to a day read, is written for leaders who may be leading teams, to give them some simple tips on how to unlock the best in their teams and organizations.
Excellent. Well, let's start. And I'm going to start with my questions, if that's okay. So my first question is, because I always like to ask too, because Ishan, I'm a curious person. So what is the core issue with engagement?
There are two ways of looking at it. And the main reason is in today's businesses, and no matter, I'm going to be talking through from a lens of manufacturing businesses or logistics, because that's the world that I'm used to. But your listeners would be able to apply the same concepts to no matter whether it's a service sector or finance sector or whatever the industry is. At the end of the day, we've got people dealing with processes in our businesses. So the issue is more and more as we advance in the world, the expectation is that we need to do more and more with less and less. That's the expectation. And in trying to do so, we need to leverage our people. And the main issue is that our workforces are not as engaged as we would like them to be. And as leaders, we are frustrated because we only got a handful of people that we always rely on to get things done. So, the diligent few. So they get burnt out, exhausted, overwhelmed, and stretched from pillar to pillar, the few people that we always rely on. And as leaders, we always want to get more things done, and we don't have the bandwidth, the capacity, nor the patience to tick off everything on our list, right? Our to-do list is longer than the hours in the day, unfortunately. So that's kind of the business, that's the business landscape that I see, and that's the culture of many businesses that I walk into. Now, I can validate this through some data. Gallup is a global company, does a lot of engagement surveys when it comes to employee engagement. They're kind of like the global authority. And I love Gallup because their data is readily available for anyone to have a look at. Now, I follow Gallup to look at, how are the best of the best doing. And when I look at the data, it's alarming. It's alarming for a couple of reasons. So let me just give a quick debrief into what the data suggests and what it looks like. So as per Gallup, there are three types of people in our workforces. The first one is the diligent, hardworking people, right? We already know who these people are because they're the ones that we always go to, right? The 2024 data suggests that there's only about 25%. I'm rounding up the numbers globally. So that means 1 in 4 of the teams and the people in our workforce are engaged. The second category are the disenchanted, disgruntled, extremely unhappy people. And they're about 15% in our workplaces, unfortunately. If you're struggling to identify who these people are, these are the type of people that if you sit next to in the canteen with a cup of tea, you really want to get up and move after about 5 minutes, right? So, feel like, they're the people that complain about everything and anything from world politics to the weather, to their neighbors, to the company, to the equipment they've been given with, and they just can't see anything going right for them, but they seem to have a solution for everything. So, they're the really unhappy category. The middle. Now, if you're good with maths, you realize there's about 60% left. That's the category that Gallup calls as disengaged. So the quietly quitting fence sitters, the people in the middle, there's a lot. And we think these are the people who leave the brains at the door. They just turn up in body only, and we think they're disengaged. My take and my experience in working across multiple countries in Asia Pac over the last 2.5 decades is that these individuals aren't disengaged. They want to be involved, and through, from leaders that we don't get the best of these people, so they have become disengaged. So hence the reason, the subtitle in the book, seemingly disengaged. They're not. So yeah, I want to explore as the conversation goes out in the next few minutes, Danette, as to how do we do that? How do we unlock the latent capacity?
Love that. And, 60%, that's a massive amount. So a lot of untapped potential. So my next question before I go to the next person who's going to ask questions is, why is it relevant in today's work environment? Because I suspect it's been a little bit like this for a while.
It has been, and thank you for pointing out, which kind of brings me to the next point. So it's not so much the 2024 data that I'm worried about. It's looking at the trend or trends of all three data points of those three categories. So the global data is available for the last 15 years through Gallup, right? And when you look at the trends, the happy people, so the percentage of the happy people, that number is going up. The percentage of the disgruntled, unhappy people, that's coming down. Now, if we just stop at that, you would be going, so what's the problem? If the happy percentage is going up and the unhappy number is coming down, isn't that a good thing? Absolutely, that's a good thing. But the problem is not so visible until you start looking at the third category, the fence sitting, the quietly quitting, those people in the middle. That number, that 60%, has stayed the same, more or less, for the last 15 years. So, which means, this is the engineer in me now coming out, my hypothesis is that we, as business leaders, we as an HR community, and we as everyone who's been trying to dial up the engagement in workforces, have been putting in a lot of hard work trying to please the extremely disgruntled, extremely difficult to work with group. And yes, we have shifted the needle, but not as much as we could have if we had just left them alone and just worked with the fence sitters, because they've been waiting on the sidelines like your middle child who's looking at you and wanting your love and care and a bit of TLC, but we just haven't had the time, energy to look at them and to work with them. And so we've been working too hard for little gain. And in the world that we are in today, extremely competitive, and, we need to bring our A game every day to provide the service that our customers expect and to exceed that, then there is a better way to work with. And I think that's why it's so important to look at this concept today.
I love that. And that 60% staying fairly steady for 15 years, that's an incredible statistic. Now I'm going to hand over to Al to ask your questions. And Al, maybe a little bit about why you asked those questions, if you like.
Thanks, Annette. Yeah, my question is if you have any practical tips to turn around engagement, and if you have any personal case studies that's coming from the point of view of a team member who can see that the team's disengaged and wondering if we can do anything from the point of view of an individual team member.
The book is full of personal case studies, and they all kind of have a similar thread to them. The key from a theoretical perspective is to get them involved. That's the key. And if you hear me repeat the word involve, particularly for the listeners, if that's the only thing you take out from this podcast, then you're doing great, because that is the secret. That is the secret key to unlocking the brilliance of your team's involvement. So each chapter has got a personal story as well as a global case study. So turning around, team employees' engagement levels, 3 stories come to mind. 2 that I share on a regular basis in my keynotes and on other podcasts. So one from South Africa, story of Sam. Then there's a recent one in Australia, how Julian, a forklift driver, and still is a forklift driver, who in 3-4 months ended up being a changed leader from just almost being invisible in the business. Something he said in a coffee chat during a break was, Ishan, I feel valued and I feel like I'm adding value, was one of his things. And I got goosebumps when I heard that, because that was so profound, and I could see how Julian was adding value. But I think the better story to tell is perhaps the one that I haven't shared a lot. It's a story from India, the work that I did with a client of mine. It's a rural part of India, but it's a multinational company. So it's in an industrialized zone in a rural part of India. They made alcoholic beverages and employed many people in the local towns. Now, when we did the work, one of the things is, how do you inspire the people? So I start with that concept on chapter 1. You got to light up the fire in people. And in many businesses, there are 2 aspects. One is, of course, we want to inspire the people and you want to lead for good. And there's all the leadership stuff, the stuff, I call it, Danette, it's the stuff that you do, the leadership stuff, but also the tangible, how do we improve a business from a productivity perspective? And of course, people want to see what the tangible benefits are. Show me the money, from the tagline from the famous movie. So there are ways to identify opportunities to improve. And when we went into this site, so the leader, Bala, so one of these people that I immediately made a connection with, Bala, the site leader, who was a real people person, big hugs and welcoming, and that that it's a nice, warm, welcoming, and the little things they do, you go like, yeah, look, you do take care of your people, is the kind of message that I went to the back of my head within the first hour itself. Fast forward to a couple of days, I think this was around Wednesday, where we go through identifying opportunities to improve from a pure machine productivity, waste elimination, etc. They had done their homework really well. They had listed all the potential projects, and prioritizing is not so difficult. We simply do a quadrant matrix of the size of the prize and also the difficulty of implementation. And, we want to look at the upper right-hand quadrant of bigger gains and easy to implement is the kind of opportunities we look for. So there were a couple of pretty obvious projects that I had highlighted and said, like, well, let's do this. And here was Bala right at the back of the, their meeting room, the boardroom, with the hands at the back of his head and kind of with the chair leaning back. And you can see that he was in a bit of a pensive mood. And he just sprung out of the chair and just walked up to me, grabbed the whiteboard marker from my hand, and it circled probably about the 6th or 7th project down the list. And it was around water savings. There was a little bit of a moment of everyone in the room, including some of their global team who had come in to launch the program, thinking, what's he seeing that we are not? Why do we need to go after water? The company already, being a multinational company, they were already onto it. So there was not a lot of water to be saved because, they were already in that mindset. So I asked the obvious question as to, Pala, what's the rationale? What are you seeing that we are not? And then he went on to explain, say, like, Ishan, we're in the state of Karnataka in India. So it's one of the semi-arid dry states. So not a lot of waterfall or rainfall coming into this state. And he said, so saving water is a big thing from a society point of view. He said, Ishan, what you may not realize is that a lot of these people, when they go home, they go into a home where they don't have running water. Their wives, because typically it's the males who came to work in the factory, their wives would have had to walk for miles to carry water, perhaps with a child on their hip, to bring water into the house with whatever they can. So saving water is something they connect with and something that they deeply care about because they know what it is to save water at home. And he then turned around and showed how we've got these corporate values that we talk about being environmentally responsible. And he said, I want to be the leader that not only we just print these on the wall, that we actually live and walk and demonstrate that we do. And all of a sudden, this 5-foot-tall leader was a 6-foot giant in my eyes. We led that project. And of course, I build the capability with the teams on how to tap into that and make those savings. Not only have they managed to tap into more savings than they had originally estimated, but also, what do you think the level of engagement would be in the next round, in the next quarter, when Bala stands up in a town hall and says, this is what we've done, this is what all of you have done for this. But by the way, next quarter, we're starting off a project on whatever, whether it is machine downtime or waste or whatever. What do you think the level of engagement would be? People putting their hand up saying, yeah, I would want to be part of it, because you've already demonstrated that you actually care, not only as a capitalist organization just to improve the bottom line. You actually live and breathe by the values. So they're the kind of little things that leaders can do to demonstrate what these corporate values are, but also to demonstrate what kind of a leader you are. The one that walks the talk is the phrase, right? So, yeah, so not just one, but I know that project was instrumental in turning around engagement on that side. But then there are the stories of Sam and stories of Julian as individuals, how we managed to turn around individuals as well. So those stories are in the book.
For that issue, that's a fantastic story, how one person can have a different perspective that changes everything.
That's the power of leadership, right? The ripples in the pond you make. It might seem like a small ripple in the first round, but as the ripple goes wider and deeper, they tend to be quite big ripples. Janet, I cut you off, sorry.
No, I was going to hand over to John for the next question, but no, you're totally right about the ripple effect. So, John, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ishan, so far. My question's around, and I get that you work in manufacturing more so people are at work, but in office environments where we've got a lot of remote working since COVID, it's so much easier to disengage. On a podcast such as this, we have our cameras on, but you go to a meeting within government and everyone's got their camera off and you don't know whether they're there or not. What are some strategies that can help leaders re-engage with their staff or get them to engage?
Good one, a tricky one, and a landscape that I'm not too familiar with, but I can understand and it resonates. So, John, if you don't mind, I'd like this to be, I'm going to turn the tables and we might just have a conversation going back and forth. Right? So let's try to figure this out collectively, if you wouldn't mind, and maybe the rest of you on as well. Would it be right to assume that in a world of working from home, that the assumption is that if you're not at home and if the camera is not on, that you might not be as engaged as if you are if you are at workplace? Do you think there might be some validity in that thinking?
Yeah, potentially there is. Yeah, I mean, I'm of the opinion that if you're not going to work at work, you're not going to work at home. Doesn't matter. And quite the other way. If you are a worker at work, you are going to step up at home.
Yeah, so I wonder whether one of the misconceptions is that, hey, if the camera's not on, you might be on Facebook or you might be doing something else, all of that. But the truth might be that you might be looking after a sick child as well. Well, another thought might be that, look, we all have to be in that 9 to 5 time frame. So it's the time that we put in as opposed to the quality of the work that we deliver, right? So are you keeping time? Or are you looking at the output, I guess?
Yeah, and look, I agree that if the output is still quality, and it doesn't matter whether you do that in half an hour or 3 hours. The output generally is what we look at for people, and as long as the quality of life, you're supporting them in what they've got to do, whether it's looking after a sick child or otherwise. It's not a bad thing.
Again, that keyword of involvement, it still applies, I think. So we can connect and we can get involved remotely as much as we can work from home remotely, right? So I think the challenge that I'd like to put forward and my invitation to the leaders is then how do we leverage the same technology to get our people involved in improving productivity, in improving the culture, in solving some of the problems that we collectively have at workplaces. That is the key. So as someone who helps to unlock productivity, the key is solving problems, solving the right problems.
Yes.
There are so many problems to be solved, and we don't have the time, energy, and the money to solve all of them. So once you know which ones are important, and you can have, fancy leadership concepts like strategy deployment or goal deployment, the buzzwords and the key phrases. As we finalize those initiatives that needs to be deployed within a business quarter, maybe then trying to leverage your team, irrespective of whether they're at home or working from home or whether they're in the office. How do we get people involved is the key. So if you're allowing, and if we've realized that we can work from home and we are trying to solve problems together, then I think we also need to look at technology that helps people to collaborate. I don't want to mention any names, but there are so many apps and technologies, as simple as I am going to drop a name now, as simple as using Google Sheets, whether it's a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint deck or a Word, right? We all, many of us are familiar with those. But there are so many softwares, that helps to be more creative, much more creative, shared whiteboards and all of that. So how do we so let's leverage the technology then, if you're using technology to work from home, to do the same to get engagement, involvement, to shift productivity. Do you think that will work?
I think that will. I think that's a very positive answer to the question as to how we can get people to engage. Absolutely.
Yeah, and same as when we're in manufacturing and we are on site in person and we have projects or initiatives where we are solving constraints or improving productivity. But one of the things we do is we have one KPI, so one key metric that can show us whether the situation is getting better or worse. So that's one of the things we do. And then we track whether on a daily, weekly basis, but no longer than weekly basis, to see if the things we're doing, if the concepts we're applying are actually helping to shift the problem in a better way.
Yeah.
So the same could be true, right? So we are working remotely and collaborating remotely. let's measure what matters. What's the KPI that's going to tell us whether the situation is getting better or worse? What's the frequency we're going to measure it in? And it'll tell us whether it's getting greener or redder, if that's a word.
Yes. Yep. No, beauty. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Jez, do you want to share your question?
Yeah, I was going to say my internet's being a bit choppy, so I might pass it over to Graham if Graham wants to throw his question into the ring.
Well, no, I don't, Jez, and thank you for asking. Ishan, I have a couple of questions. The internet clearly has set the trend, so no longer are we just asking one. And my questions are eerily similar to those of Jez. And they are, so from your experience and the work that you've done with clients, why have we ended up here? So what are some of the thinking that you've been able to identify that's led us to this situation where we've had, for the last 15 years, no measurable gain in re-involving people who don't feel involved?
There are two. One is that I think the 80s leadership/management style, Jack Welch, the famous CEO of GE, who turned around its performance even from a time of when it was doing good, he took it to a place of even better, right? So challenging, and there are many books, there are many inspirational quotes from Jack Welch, great leader from turning around. But one of the things that he's said amongst all the quotes, promote the top 10, fire the bottom 10. Don't know whether they actually did it or not, but that mindset, I think, has stood as actually that's a leadership strategy we can all work with. There's a little bit of truth in that, when we observe how organizations work. And second one is that I think leaders tend to think that they have to fix everything themselves. And this tends to work against the very thing that they're trying to fix. So we are so busy and here are all the suggestions that are coming up, and they feel like, wow, I need to take this all on my shoulders and I need to fix this. And I've only got 4 people that I can rely on. So I go back to that model of I'll keep promoting the top 10, and they're the diligent, hardworking people, and they're the ones who I can trust, and they work the 12-hour days fixing the problem for my people. But what these fence sitters want is they want to get involved. So what I share with leaders is don't fix it for the people, fix it with the people. That helps to solve 2 issues. But I reckon those 2 mindsets, I'm sure there are many others, but from what I've seen, I think that's why we've ended up in the situation of the fence sitters being just stuck there.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess in there's certainly some parallels there with a lot of organisations. Public sector would be one example, but certainly not the only example, where we have struggled to use the word to describe a human being, but talent and talent management program. We refer to human beings as talent, which just does my head in, but we haven't got time to get into that. But this idea of let's recognise and reward the high achievers, which is your top 10 using Jack Welch's model, and then getting rid of the bottom 10 or addressing that it's that human tendency for us to want to address the squeaky wheel. So the people who are making the most noise, who are most actively disengaged, the most unhappy, angry, blah, 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 are also going to get more of our attention. So it's the middle 30 or 40 that we are essentially ignoring because they're not making a lot of noise. They're not making any substantial demands. It's not that they're not making demands at all, but they are asking to be involved, but they're not making as much noise as the top 10 and the bottom 10. So
so true. Yeah, and then we end up in this vicious cycle, right? We want to do more, but then people are unhappy, and we're burning out the engaged. And you know what? If we don't do anything different soon, we're going to burn out those diligent few, and you're at risk of the diligent few becoming quiet quitters. That's the real danger in all of this for the leaders today.
Yep. Okay. Nice. Thanks, Ishan. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham/Jez. That was a very good question. So we are at the time where I reckon we do our key takeaways. So I'm going to start with Al.
Thank you so much for today, Ishan. There's so much in there. I'm going to start with get involved. That really strikes a chord for me, where I love that story where management may see number one as the key, but if everybody else sees number six, the only way we're going to find that out is ask everybody else. They have the solution to the problem. It's not what we may think at the very top.
Thanks, Al. And John, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it was more the story from India, and it's solving the right problems, finding out what is actually important and solve those things. There's going to be a plethora of problems to be solved, but what's the big one? What's the right problem to solve? So yeah, and being community involved to me is very important. So yeah, thank you for that, Ishan.
Graham.
Yeah, hi. How you going? I was going to hand over to Jez to summarise. Jez? Yes? No?
I can, if you want. I can have a quick go.
Yeah, jump in.
For a
jump
Jez, and then Graham can come on.
I know that was at the very beginning, but the stats surrounding disengagement is so fascinating. It's so big. And then the other thing that I've highlighted is the word involved and feeling valued. Those two things have a big underline for me. So thank you so much for today's chat.
I think you've nailed it, Jess.
Thanks, Jez. And Graham, did you want to...
Jez actually literally just read the notes that I'd written down. Well done, Jez. Good bit of ESP there. I think, again, it's the breadth of this topic is such that we could spend hours talking about it. But again, it's some great insights. I love the case studies and this idea of how do we keep people more involved. I'm really curious, and maybe we have you come back on to talk more about one of the things that jumped out for me is this idea of where does the sort of responsibility lie? Like, how do we share the responsibility between the employer and the employee? And that's an interesting question in itself, because if I'm an employee, feel that I'm not really valued, I'm on the fence, then how likely is it that something's going to happen that's going to change my mind about wanting to be more involved? So do I just sit back and wait for the employer to do something, or can I shift the way I'm thinking about it and get off the fence one side or the other? And as I said, it's a great conversation today. Thank you. There's so much more we could probably talk about. And just to wrap up for me, I am just going to become one of the bottom 10% and just complain an awful lot. Hang on, no, I already do.
And my takeaway, Ishan, was that 60%, like there's so much opportunity there for organisations. And I just love, what you've noticed over your years of your career about how we can really tap in and engage and involve people. So I love that. So Ishan, what about you? What's your key takeaway from the conversation today?
Well, firstly, love to come back and have a second chat. Only if we can do that sitting around a campfire over a bottle of red. Maybe in your backyard, Danette. I know you got a big backyard, so let's see if we can make that happen. We're working with people at the end of the day. So in my line of work, improving productivity is not about replacing them with robots. It's not about putting in, what are we on about these days? Artificial intelligence. So it's not about that. At the end of the day, how do we connect people and processes, whether you're in manufacturing, logistics, any kind of business? We're trying to shift organizational culture. We're trying to solve the right problems, and we're trying to move the needle. And there's so much that we can do by leveraging and involving the people in the middle. But just remember these three things, because we are dealing with people, right? So slow is fast. Slow is fast. So be patient and just allow people to make mistakes, as long as they're not critical mistakes, so that they can learn from them. So slow is fast. The other one is less is more. Organizations have huge issues prioritizing. So less is definitely more. And lastly, progress is much better than perfection, right? So just get those things done and help to progress and kick the can down the road, and don't wait for perfection. So I think they're the things that I normally share in any of the keynotes or in chats or in podcasts. So I'll do the same again.
Nice. Thanks, Ishan. Ishan, I'm pretty sure there's some listeners and viewers that might want to reach out to you. So where are the best places for people to reach out for you? Or to you, sorry.
Yeah, considering that people might be walking or driving, so trying to spell my last name is not going to be the most useful because you're going to be frustrated. What was it? And missed it. So the best way to redirect is to share the Unlock book. So it's got a website, unlockbook.com.au. If you go there, then you can, figure out how to get in touch with me. There is a PDF that you can download to read more about everything I've just shared and much more. I think there's about 24 pages of, it's like a little coffee book / magazine that I've created so that you can understand more about it. So unlockbook.com.au. Download the PDF, and if you want to get in touch, I'm sure you can figure out how to get hold of me.
And Ishan, we'll make sure that we put like your website and that in the podcast descriptions, both on YouTube and where all our podcasts go out. Ishan, thank you so much. We will definitely get you back, so we'll organise that for the new year. And to all of our listeners and viewers who've been sharing our podcast, we'd like to say thank you so much. And as always, have a magical week.